Welcome, wayward souls, to a brand new episode of Echoes from the Loam with me, Fauna Blakewell. This is a tale based on the Wild Hunt, which is a widespread European folklore dating back to at least the 12th century. First recorded in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles in 1127, it depicts a phantom procession of spectral hunters, horses often led by a mythic figure riding through the night sky with ghostly hounds. So light your lantern and take my hand. Forest breathes, and Hollowmere is not mapped, not named aloud. A lone woman, Eira, walks barefoot through the mist, carrying with her a bundle of teeth wrapped in deer hide. She is a seer, summoned by the village of Caoin to interpret the signs. Dogs born with red ears, bells ringing in the wind, soil bleeding from the roots and such alike. She arrives at dusk, but no one greets her. The only sound is of hooves in the distance, slow and deliberate. A hunt stirs, she whispers to the fog, and it remembers. Eira entered the longhouse. The fog had not lifted all day. It pressed against the timber walls, seeping through the thatch like something searching. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and old ale, but no fire burned, and no voices stirred. A relic hung above the hearth, a jawbone, strung with sinew and threaded with runes, too old to name. It swayed gently through the air. Beneath it, the ash pit was cold. She knelt, not to pray, but to listen, for she knew the jawbone was not a relic. It was a record, the chronicle of the riders. Herne, crowned in antlers and rot, Edric, cloaked in crow wings, and the nameless ones, whose mouths were sewn shut with bramble. They rode when the land was wounded, when the pact was broken, and when the forest was forgotten. Eira touched the bone with her fingers, and the runes seemed to whisper to her softly, but not with words, but with sensation. Cold teeth, wet soil, a child's scream swallowed by moss and earth. The villagers had buried the wrong child. She saw it clearly now. A grave too shallow and a name spoken too soon, a ritual rushed. The pact had been broken not by malice but by fear, and the hunt does not forgive. The jawbone pulsed once in her hand and then cracked, but she did not flinch. Outside now, the fog turned black at its edges, and from deep within Hollowmere, the sound of hounds, not barking, just breathing, panting. Night did not fall, it sank heavily. The sky above Caoin turned the colour of deep waters, and the fog encroached further. The villagers gathered at the edge of the burial field at the elder's request, clutching bundles of herbs, bone charms, anything to keep them safe. No one spoke, not even the children. Eira stood apart, her deer hide bundle now buried beneath the stones. She had seen the chronicle, and she had felt the pulse of the jawbone. But it was not it was the villagers who had summoned her. And now they told her why. The hunt had come once before, generations ago, when the Romans fled and the land was raw with grief. The forest had opened. Riders emerged and they took the voice of the village. Every child born that year was cursed mute, and a pact was made. One soul, every generation, given freely and without name. But this year, the chosen child had died too soon. Fever. No ritual, no walk into the woods. The pact had not been fulfilled or honoured, and the hunt was not pleased. Eira listened closely. Not to the villagers, but to the ground. It was thrumming rhythmically. A low, bone-deep sound, like hooves against hollow earth. She strided forward past the burial field to the ridge where the forest began. The villagers were too late. They came, the riders cloaked in bark and ash, antlers tangled with sinew and faces hidden behind masks of stitched leather and moss. Their horses bled from their hooves, and their hounds had no eyes, only mouths stitched shut with bramble and bone. They did not gallop. They drifted. Eira did not run. She merely watched as the village elder was lifted from the ground, his body folded inward, his scream swallowed in the fog. And where he stood, only a bundle of roots remained. The hunt did not speak, it did not need to. It simply disappeared. The burial field was not meant for gathering. It was a place of forgetting. Stones unmarked, graves shallow, offerings. It was a place of forgetting. Stones unmarked, graves shallow, offerings buried without prayer. But tonight, the villagers stood in circle, clutching ash and antler, waiting for Eira to speak the old words. She knelt and drew a circle in the soil with her own blood. Not much, just enough to wake the ground, and the fog recoiled slightly. The pact must be remade, she said, but the name is gone. The villagers all murmured. Not one of them could remember the forest's true name. It had been spoken only once long ago when the pact was first made. Their name not written, not remembered, only felt, like rot in your teeth or grief in your marrow. Eira reached into the soil and pulled out a stone. Not carved, not natural. It was etched with a spiral that turned inward. She held it to her ear. She heard breathing. Not hers, not the villagers. Something older. The god beneath the hunt, she said. The one they ride for. It was not Herne, not Edric. It was older than both. A forgotten god of silence and soil. A name that could not be spoken, only surrendered to. She turned to the villagers. One must walk into Hollowmere, she said. Blindfolded, silent and without name. No one stepped forward. The chosen child was dead, the pact was broken, but the forest does not accept delay. The fog surged, the hounds began to breathe louder, and the spiral stone cracked in her palm. The sound it made was not a crack as such, but a cry, long, low, and wet, like breath drawn through roots. The villagers flinched. Eira stood. Garin Rear rides beneath the hunt, she said. He is not crowned, he is not named. He is the cry beneath the hooves. The pact was made with him, not with the riders. The villagers stared blankly, and one woman, old and blind, began to weep. You must choose, Eira said. One soul, blindfolded, silent and given freely. But no one moved. You summoned me, she said. You knew this would come. Stillness. The fog pressed ever closer. The hounds began to circle the burial field, their stitched mouths unravelling, threads falling like dead petals. Eira stepped into the circle. Then you leave me no choice. She spoke loudly to the fog, to the hounds. I am not of Caoin, she said, but I carry its grief. She removed her cloak. Her feet were black with soil. She took the blindfold from the bundle and tied it over her eyes, and the villagers just watched, unmoving as she knelt and pressed her forehead to the earth. Garanrear, she said, take what is freely given. The ground pulsed and the spiral stone dissolved into ash. The fog surged upwards, swallowing the moon. And from deep within Hollowmere, the long cry rose. Not a scream, not a howl. Something that remembered. Eira stood. She walked toward the forest, and the hounds followed. She walked blindfolded. The forest did not greet her. Branches did not sway. Roots did not tangle, they reached. The soil beneath her feet grew warm, then wet, and then cold again, cycling almost like breath. The hounds followed. Silent, but their mouths slack and dripping. She could hear them panting, but it was not animalistic, it was more human, familiar. She kept walking. The blindfold moved against her eyes, not tight enough to cause pain, and it whispered in sensations. A child's hand, a burial stone, her own name spoken backward. The forest bent around her, trees leaned in, their bark slick with something that smelled like a cross between iron and milk. She reached out to steady herself and touched a trunk. She tore off the blindfold. But the forest did not change, it only revealed. The trees were not trees, they were bodies. Twisted, rooted, eyeless. Each one bore a face she knew. The villagers, the elder, the child, her own mother, mouths sewn shut with moss. And where their eyes would be, gaping wounds that somehow seemed to stare at her anyway. Not to see, to accuse. The hounds encircled her one by one. One opened its mouth fully now. No thread, no flesh, just a void. Eira ran, or at least she tried, but the forest did not allow any direction. Every step led deeper, every breath grew louder, and the long cry rose again. The soil split and a hand emerged. Long, root-bound, crowned in antlers made of bone. It was Garanrear. He did not speak, he did not move, but his presence folded the forest inwards. Time collapsed and Eira saw herself as a child, burying teeth in the garden. She saw herself as an old woman, blind and weeping, and she saw herself as a hound. She fell to her knees in surrender. The hounds did not bite. They breathed into her mouth. Her voice unravelled. Not her scream, but her story. It spilled into the soil where it was devoured. She did not die. She was changed. The forest sealed behind her. No path, no light, no sound. Save for the breath of the hounds. Garenrir stood before her, crowned in antlers that dripped with memory. His face was not a face. It was bark and bone and shadow. His eyes, they weren't his eyes, they were hers. Eira knelt, not in submission, but in recognition. The hunt had ridden for centuries, bound to grief and pact, but Eira had walked freely. She had given her name, her voice, her story, and not for kin, but for strangers, for a village that had forgotten its own rights. Garenrir reached out. His hand was root and tendon wrapped in moss. He touched her chest, and her heart did not stop, it grew. Antlers sprouted from her shoulders, and her skin darkened, etched with spirals that pulsed with breath. Her mouth stitched itself shut, not with thread, but with silence. She rose. The hounds bowed. Garenrir stepped back, and Eira stepped forward. The hunt rode again that night, but it did not take. It watched. It remembered. And at its head rode two figures, one crowned in antlers, the other cloaked in fog, eyes glowing like embers. The villagers of Caerwyn heard the hooves. They hung their charms, they whispered her name. But she was no longer Eira. She was the second cry. And the forest and the village would never forget her. When the moon is blind and bells don't ring, and black dogs pace with broken wing, we whisper low, we do not lie, we sing the song of second cry. She walked alone where no one dared, with teeth unshown and soul laid bare. She gave her name, she gave her breath, and found a love that lives in death. Her eyes are roots, her voice is flame. She rides with hounds that have no name. She does not take, she does not speak. She watches those who harm the weak. So leave your bread and hang the thread, and mark your door with soil and red. For if you stray or fail to hide, she'll call your name, the second cry. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.